Welcome to a new edition of the Neon Jazz Interview Series with North Carolina-based veteran jazz pianist Claire Ritter. Born and bred and living in North Carolina, Claire is the author of over 200 compositions, and over the years she has performed in festivals, concert halls, and museums in the United States, Canada, Europe, and Asia. Her latest CD, Eclipse Orange, is a collaboration with the great pianist Rand Blake. On their first duo outing, this innovative third-stream set of pianists weave their singular voice together into a beautiful celebration of Thelonious Monk's 100th birthday. Her body of work is impressive, and she has great stories to back them up. So dig her and dig this interview.
Claire, thanks for taking a minute out for Neon Jazz. I appreciate it.
Yeah, well, no problem.
And I wanted to start off here and ask you about Eclipse Orange with Rand Blake, and I want to talk to you about kind of what this recording means to you and what the artistic vision was for this collective pursuit that you went after.
Well, you know, it was a culmination of several things. I brought Rand to Charlotte with the help and the support of Queen's University and the Arts Council here to do a performance recording. And, you know, because of that, we were able to orchestrate it. But, you know, my involvement with Rand goes way back to the early 1980s. And I've wanted to bring him to Charlotte, to North Carolina, for quite a while. And so this was an opportunity to do a duo piano recording performance, which was very special, obviously. You know, I do a lot of, my thing is composing, and I've worked with photographers and painters and visual types of things. And then on the other hand, I'm a big fan of Thelonious Monk and Debussy and Satie and, you know, some of those types of composers. And it all kind of came together. The concert actually, we were celebrating the Monk 100th anniversary, as well as women painters, abstract painters, on the program. And so it, you know, there was a wide array of different colors and different things. So, yeah, to answer your question, it's hard to put it, you know, simplify it. It was quite a treat, to say the least, to be able to include him on this. My love of nature and art, and his love of, you know, the abstract. He's sort of the Wells Fargo of the modern piano world, I think, in terms of, you know, his creativity is quite unique, as you know. And I studied with him for about 5 years, after I moved to Boston, after actually studying with Mary Lou Williams, for 2 or 3 years. And, he's just so unusual, you know, with his approach to the teaching and his whole personality, how it all works into his music. And you've talked to him, you know him pretty well, I assume.
Yeah, I interviewed last week, and it was very illuminating. He was a fascinating person, for sure.
Yeah, he's sort of like the auteur of, you know, the jazz world, I think. He's obscure.
Yeah.
And he's got his noir thing going. Yeah, we both love, I've been a fan of Monk, Thelonious Monk, forever, and his sense of space and angular, you know, types of rhythms and intervals and things, and we both share that. So, you know, the classical, you know, meets the avant-garde jazz. You know, I worked with a lot of musicians. I was in Boston, lived in Boston, Cambridge for 16 years, and taught at New England Conservatory in the 1990s. But I worked with a lot of folks up there, Dominique Eade and Steve Swallow and Dave Holland and Ricky Ford and Kristen Correa and Taki Masuko and people like that for years and years. So there's a thread definitely running there.
So let me get back to the beginnings of your life to kind of get an idea of where you started and where you're at right now. Talk to me about your childhood and how you got into not only jazz but into the arts.
Well, you know, I love nature. I love open spaces. I grew up in a rural area with horses and that's very much in my personality. But I was able to study with a jazz arranger who had moved to Charlotte from New York. He worked with the Charlotte Symphony, and I studied with him as a kid. Just started playing piano because I loved the sound of it, and had the opportunity to work with him. And then went on and studied formally classical piano, but I was always playing these jazz pieces on the side and making up my own tunes as I went along. So, you know, I think my personality was as such that I was always looking to do something outside of the box, but really didn't have the opportunity until I moved to Boston. And that's when, you know, the whole world kind of opened up for me, because of the different, you know, genres of different styles of jazz and free jazz and, composing and creating on a higher level. Yeah, well, I lived in Boston for about 16 years in Cambridge, and, I first heard Rand at the Coolidge Corner Theater and heard him play, and that was an inspiration for me to pursue him and study with him. But I just was attracted to his approach, his sound, his uniqueness. I wasn't really looking for a path of traditional jazz, you know, something more creative. You know, I think I was telling you my growing up was really completely the opposite. It was in a rural area with a lot of nature and space and horseback riding and things like that. But I had studied with Ziggy Hurwitz, who was a jazz arranger with the Charlotte Symphony here as a young person, and got a taste of jazz and, you know, harmonic structures and sounds and things like that. But I was always making up my own stuff and, you know, going outside of the box and wanting to find a higher level of expression, which I found in Boston.
So let me ask you this. Did you always know that you were going to be a musician? Was that something that was kind of set in your path, or did that kind of evolve over time?
I was drawn to piano at 6 years old, and I think I knew that that's what I wanted to do. I just wasn't exposed to as many you know, higher level opportunities of teaching, of studying and that kind of thing, being in Charlotte, because Charlotte's not really a jazz mecca by any means. And it's just, I found it, you know, I found it, I guess, a little later after I had pursued my, classical degree in piano. And, when I met up with Mary Lou Williams when she was teaching at Duke University, that really piqued my interest in the creative side of jazz. You know, a lot of times in the rural areas, you only hear the traditional jazz, which is a beginning, but and then after studying with her, I moved to Boston, and then from there went on. But that's how it started, and I think it was kind of a fluke in a way that you know, kind of a serendipitous situation where you know, I was given that opportunity just kind of out of the blue, and found out about her who I actually went to hear at Spoleto in Charleston. There are really a couple of places where that are more of a musical scene in Carolina, and that would be Charleston and Asheville, and perhaps the Duke University area.
So what did you learn from someone like Mary Lou? That had to be a huge, huge experience for you, you know, as a person and as a musician.
It was, I studied with her, I think it was 77 and 78, which was when she was in residence at Duke University, and I think her teaching approach was more as being a mentor and sitting down and writing out riffs and motifs, and then illustrating them on the piano. You know, it wasn't like a formal academic type of thing, but just being in her presence and kind of under her umbrella for a rather brief period of time. It was life-changing for me to absorb those things through osmosis, and it's hard to put it into words. but she was such a huge figure, and
Yeah.
it was such a beginning, just a seed, really.
Absolutely. You know, you've been fortunate enough. You've produced so much music, and you've been all over the world. What have you learned over all of these years about jazz and how jazz has changed? What have you discovered about the changes over the years?
You know, being able to work with creative musicians who want to do improvisation and compose at the same time is just a whole nother world. And I mean, I think all the electronic input and production that's come into all music has just, we've gotten away from the acoustic instrument, and I don't think it's just jazz, but I think it's a lot of different genres of music, and I think that's changed a lot. I don't know if it's because of all the technology and the streaming and so forth, but to me it's a different type of creativity, but it's still not like connecting, and being at one with your instrument, with your acoustic instrument. But yeah, I mean, I've always loved working with people that like to orchestrate their own ideas and in collaboration, especially in duets. It's really, you learn a lot. You have to really cover a lot of your instrument and be technically proficient, as well as use your imagination.
The one thing that's a big teacher for us are the early jazz shows that we've seen. And I want to know this. What early jazz, like one of the first live jazz shows did you see that really moved you?
I wasn't really exposed to, like, if I had been in Boston or New York, I wasn't really exposed to those kinds of, the Monks and the Duke Ellingtons, and so I would say Mary Lou Williams was really the first for me, other than more of a traditional type performer. I heard classical musicians, and we have a lot of bluegrass here, but which is something that I'm not really that connected to. I was more into listening to the Debussy and Ravel and Satie and Stravinsky and things like that. So most of my exposure was actually just listening to recordings of classical, more impressionistic classical composers. So
let me ask you this generically, for someone that's dedicated their lives to jazz, why do you love jazz?
Why do I love jazz? Because I'm able to express myself and create. It's an individual art form. I think it's pretty wide open. I mean, there's so many. It's very broad, so you can bring in whether it's Brazilian music or Spanish music or avant-garde classical music or whole tones. You can incorporate your own interpretation, and I think you can bring your personality into it. So I think personality has a lot to do with it. I feel sort of like an individual painter in a way would feel, where you're kind of doing your own thing, and you're able to express yourself like that.
So you've been at this for a long time. So my question to you is this. Is there anything that you want to do in your career that you haven't done yet? Some specific things that you're looking forward to?
I guess I've had over several hundred compositions published and recorded. I would like to get a good number of those transcribed and formalized, I guess. I could put it as kind of formalized in notation. They're all written down in lead sheets, of course, but I'd like to have them transcribed, and some of them more in detail. And that's a very big job. But I do have a pretty large body of work now, so that would be one of my next projects.
So everything's going to come down to this. I got one final question for you, and I want to know this. That kind of gets to the essence of who you are. Everyone has a version or an interpretation of you? Your family, your friends, your fans, colleagues, but you know yourself best. Who do you think you are?
That's kind of a hard question. Who do I think I am? I'm a composer. I'm a teacher. And you know, I really enjoy transferring ideas with, whether it be with my students or my colleagues, my co-musicians. I think that probably means the most to me, sharing. I don't think I could put it in one word.
No, that's beautiful. That's perfect. That's exactly what I was looking for. Claire, thank you for taking some time out for Neon Jazz to talk about the new project with Rand and to talk about your life and music. I really appreciate it.
Well, thank you, Joe. I appreciate your interest, and maybe we'll cross paths again.
Thanks for listening and tuning in to yet another Neon Jazz interview, where we give you a bit of insight into the finest players in North Carolina, Kansas City, and spots all over the world, giving fans all that jazz. And thanks to Claire for her cool and her stories. If you want to hear more interviews, go to Famous Interviews with Joe Domino on the iTunes Store. Visit neonjazz at youtube.com. And for everything Neon Jazz, go to the neonjazz.blogspot.com. Until next time, enjoy the music, my friends.
Neon Jazz.